we had to check all of the shower stalls to make sure no one was passed out. So one time he pretended to be passed out in a shower stall, and I go in, I say, "Are you on duty?" And I open up all the shower stalls, and there he is lying unconscious on the floor. And I am so afraid. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm panicking. I'm getting my phone out ready to dial 911. And then he's like, "Ah, just kidding, gotcha." And I'm like, oh my gosh.
What is up, everyone? It is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. And so today is a very long-awaited video because today I'm going to be spilling all of the resident assistant, also known as RAT. And so if you don't know what an RA is, I have a bunch of RA related videos on my channel, which I will have linked down below. But basically, an RA is a college campus position. These are typically older students who live in the dorms, also known as residence halls. At Berkeley, we weren't really allowed to say the word dorm. And so the RA lives in the halls with the freshman students, transfer students, as well as like continuing students. And basically the RA helps to build community. They act as a mentor. They have budgets so they can put on events. And so for me, I was a resident assistant my sophomore year. And so I had my floor of like 50 to 60 students that I was in charge of. And then also as an RA, you hold the duty phone. If there's emergencies, people are locked out, like wild things are happening, then residents or other people will call you on the duty phone, and then you have to go and handle the situation. So basically you're on duty from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. so the entire night. And a common misconception is that people think that, okay, when you're on duty you have to stay up the entire night, which is totally false because you can go to sleep. It's just that if people call you at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., you have to wake up and then you have to go deal with the problem. And then my junior and senior years of Berkeley, I was also a part of residential life, but I was a senior resident assistant. So similar thing, I still had residents, but I wasn't on duty anymore. So I didn't have to hold the phones anymore or go on rounds and like walk around and check to make sure that everything was okay. And so my friend is going to join me and we're going to talk and spill all of the RAT, from like duty stories to breaking up parties, all of the totally wild, insane things that we experienced while being resident assistants. Okay, awesome. Hopefully we are recording via Zoom now. So right now I'm joined by my friend. Why did my voice crack like that? Oh my gosh. So now I'm joined by my friend. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I was an RA for 2 years, and both years I was in a traditional style building. So the first year I had about 100 residents, and then the second year I had about 120. I used to work with Rachel as an RA. We had some fun times together and some stories that we're excited to share from what it's actually like to be an RA and the things that you might actually come across if you're considering being an RA, or if you are one now and wondering what the job's going to be like. We have plenty to tell you.
So yeah, before we get started, a little disclaimer. These are just our experiences from being an RA. So all of the names and like locations and stuff in this video aren't the actual like names of the people that we will be including, but everything is just from our personal experiences being an RA. The first category is wild duty story.
One time I was on duty and I came across someone just throwing up in the bathroom. And I was like, oh my gosh, like obviously when you're an RA, you have to look through the entire building. You go on your rounds, you go through the hallways, the common areas, and then of course the bathrooms. And they always have you check under the stalls, making sure no one's like passed out in case you have to call 911. And you always pray to God that you never see anything in the bathroom because they tend to be the worst or most distressed cases. And so there was this kid that was just violently throwing up. And so also when you're an RA, luckily you have other, like me and Rachel and same staff. Luckily we had other people that you could call if you're like, okay, this looks like something bad. I want a second opinion. So I called on my upper resources supervisor. I called on my lateral resources, other staff members to come. And then I find that it's just a symptom of a larger event going on, which was a sleepover party in the lounge. And so a bunch of the residents had joined a similar organization, and they thought it would be really fun if they threw a party in the common area and then also had a sleepover. And so it was really funny going in and be like, RA on duty, you can't sleep here. Like one of our policies is you can't just sleep in random areas. And so some people pretended that they were asleep and didn't hear me. When you're an RA, like you're not legally able to like force someone out of the room. I know you're there. Like, I see you in the sleeping bag, like all this stuff. And then we had to transport a kid who was just throwing up in the bathroom. And so it was just a wild thing where it was like having multiple RAs have to like get these kids and like shepherd herd them out of the building because only like one of them lived there and he thought it'd be fun to host this party. And it took forever, but we finally got him out.
So that's so interesting because I feel like I have had a similar kind of like organization that was like squatting in the lounges. So like they stayed there or they try to stay there overnight, which is sort of interesting. But at our staff meeting that night, because each week we have staff meetings, we were talking about how RAs saw that there were these groups that were like sleeping in the lounges. They stayed there overnight. They like ate food there and it like smelled in the lounges, and how that was starting to become a problem for the custodial staff who have to clean the spaces. And so right after our staff meeting, since I'm an SRA, I don't have duty anymore, so I don't have to carry those phones or like respond to those crises anymore. I was going up the elevator to my coworker's room, and she was actually on duty because we had to get something from her room to go to Hall Association, the student government meeting. And then in the lounge, since the lounge is right next to her room, we see the organization that we just talked about in staff meeting squatting in the lounge, which was like very, very insane since like we just talked about them. We go into the lounge. They like didn't want to leave. We were like, oh, you're a part of this organization. You can't stay here kind of thing. And they're like, no, we're just studying for an exam. And we're like, oh, what exam? And there's like 20 people in the room. You're not all studying for the same exam together. And then one was like, oh, Econ 1. And then other people were like, definitely did not have econ books out. So then my coworker writes the report. And because this is an organization doing this in the lounge, which isn't allowed, then we had to go to other meetings because of this organization. And then it was just a hot mess because technically these organizations can't be doing that and it constitutes as hazing.
You just reminded me of another thing is that with the common spaces, once I was in charge of a building where everyone was very social, and like more than half of the building had joined some sort of social organization or another. And so they loved being in the lounges. They were super rowdy and loud. So a lot of the part of the job was just noise complaints, being like, hey, it's quiet hours and pooping the party. A lot of times they were like, okay, well, if we're too loud in common spaces, then we're going to take the common amenities and put them in our private spaces. So there was a couch war that broke out where people would steal the couches from the lounge, from the common areas, and they'd put them in their rooms and see how many couches they could accumulate. And then they ventured out of my jurisdiction into another building and stole all of their couches. So then that building was so angry. So then they broke into our building and stole all the couches out of people's rooms and back and forth. And of course, this isn't like custodial's job to be like breaking in back into rooms to get all their couches. So it became my job to have to get all the couches back in order at all times. So it was a bunch of like detective work of hunting down people that I was suspecting stole the couch and then be like, did you steal the couch? And then them always denying it. And then you being like, I have a master key to the building. Am I going to see what you're saying? And they're like, shoot. And then I found that someone was living in our building that did not live there. And they had lost their housing contract, but they never left. And they were just living in another person's room and pretending like they didn't live there anymore when really they'd been there for 3 months after they'd lost their housing contract. So it was this wild time of this couch war where it was like building A versus building B and who could have the most couches. And then just a big headache for the RAs who had to then carry them back and forth upstairs because these buildings didn't have elevators.
Yeah, this is why we cannot have nice things. And also, if anyone of you watching have seen university like lounge couches, they are disgusting. I don't think they get cleaned. And so people sleeping on them, it's so gross. Like if you like hit them, I'm sure you could see dust fly up. Totally reminds me of one year, like residents, they were like super close friends in the room and they all pushed their beds together to make a mega bed. So they were like all sleeping on the same bed together. And then like lice broke out on their floor. And so there's just lice everywhere. The next category is funniest or weirdest thing a resident has said or done.
So definitely one of the funny ones was one time I was on duty and I was making my rounds, and part of our rounds is also the outdoor spaces surrounding the buildings because we're there for security, making sure all our residents are safe in many capacities. But one time I was in this big open quad and there were just 2 of my residents just sitting there in the quad, and I was like, what are you doing? Why are you sitting in the middle of the quad in this open space? Like it's a Saturday night, like why are you not doing anything else? And they're like, well, we really tried to like go find something to do, but no one would like invite us to anything. We weren't let in anywhere. So we ended up playing Edward 40 Hands. And I was like, oh, so like you're just sitting here. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's a drinking game where you have a 40-ounce can of beer in one hand taped to your hand and then one in the other taped to your hand. And it's a race to see who can finish it fastest. And I just had two residents literally sitting in a quad playing this game. And so of course I'm like, since you're right here in the open and I'm an RA on duty, like I have to write you up for this. I have to report this incident. And then one of them had been written up like 4 times that week. He was like, oh, I've been written up so many times. Like, is there anything I can do? And I was like, well, you can dispose of the materials and maybe even recycle the can, and I'll include it in the incident report that you were compliant when the RA got intervened in the scene. And so he's like, okay. And then he went and dumped it and watered some plants and recycled the can appropriately. And so at least we had a win for sustainability.
It was like the first week of school, so like I barely knew anyone. I like went around the night before to like introduce myself, like, oh, happy like first day of school, happy move in or whatever. Like, my name is Rachel, I'm your RA. And so like you don't really know anyone yet since it's the first week of school. And so like literally this resident emails me and he's like, hi Rachel, like, do you have any concealer? Like, I need to hide some hickeys from my parents who are coming to visit me today. And then I was like, what? This is so weird. We just met and I'm your RA.
No, I definitely had a similar situation, not where I was like borrowing something of mine. This incident happened at 4 in the morning where a resident came and knocked on my door and they were like, oh, do you have anything for like vomit cleanup? I assume you're the RA, so you can help clean this up. And I was like, great. Like woken up in the middle of the night. Now it's a vomit case. So ew. So you write them up. Obviously, they threw up in the hall. You have to report the incident. And then it was kind of like, you don't even want to know why they were throwing up there, but it's your job in case you do know, you report it. But we just started throwing up everywhere. And now I can't even get them to go home. And our finals in 3 hours. And I was like, oh my gosh, what? Given it's finals week, I'm a student too with finals at that point. But it was just like a case of when one thing becomes something totally different, which becomes something totally different. And then you're spending another hour writing up the report for all of it. But I love that they think that when they ask for your help, that gets them out of any liability for all the actions that they just took that needed the RA.
Yeah, being an RA during finals week is the most stressful time, and you like hope and pray that no one knocks on your door at 3 or 4 in the morning, because then, oh, your final at 8 a.m. the next day, you're going to only have 3 hours of sleep. Sorry, buds. It sucks.
Yep. Sometimes it's literally just to ask for a vacuum. It's the worst.
The next category is the funniest or weirdest time you wrote someone up. Because as an RA, like John said, we have to write people up or document the situation if you see people breaking the residence hall rules.
So this is one of my favorite memories of when I was an RA. It was my funniest thing to write someone up for, and I was dying laughing because I'm like, when you're an RA, you make friends with the residents, and after a while, you see someone doing something, and you're like, really, like, come on, you know who I am on this floor, like I have to write you up for this. So I was doing a movie night in my lounge, and we were watching a movie with a bunch of residents, hanging out, having snacks, and doing like a Friday night. And then another resident who had joined a social organization was coming back. We heard water and we're like, oh, is it raining tonight? And then it was like this continuous thing of water. And we're like, what's going on? And so we look out the window because the windows, you would crank them and then they pushed out. So you could like stick your head out the window and be like, okay, what's going on? And then I look, to my dismay, one of my residents is just peeing out the windows, literally watering the tree outside, but peeing from the 3rd floor windows.
Ew.
And then I call their name. I'm like, "Are you really doing this right now?" And then they run away, and I have to write them up. And then they get the report, and they're like, "Did you really have to say I was peeing out the window?" And I was like, "Yes, you literally peed out the window, and you got caught. But you shouldn't have done that when you knew a movie night was happening the next window over." But that was one of my favorites, where it's just so funny. Like he was right across from the bathroom. Like he literally just could have taken 2 steps, gone to a stall, really taken care of it all. But he chose to pee out the window.
Yeah, so I think my sophomore year, so like the only year that I was on duty, I was doing rounds, and that's when you like walk around the entire building. I had left the building, no one was there. And then when I come back into the building after walking around the other building that we have to check, I come back and then there's this person who is smoking a cigarette, literally like 2 feet from the entrance of the building. And I'm like, oh, SMH, like if you literally just went across the street, like you're not on campus property anymore. And then like the RA can't do anything about it. But because like I literally just saw you. You're standing right there and you're on like dorm property. It's like we have to do something about it. So I go up to him and I tell him that like, oh, like you can't smoke cigarettes right here, right next to the dorm. So then I'm like, okay, I have to document this. Like it's against the hall policy kind of thing. And then he starts to like cry or fake cry. And he's like, no, I can't get written up. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. Like, we have to document this. But he almost cried. The next category is roommate conflicts and mediation. So it was in a triple room, 3 roommates. They were the best of friends. Like after the first few months living together, I always saw them together eating at the dining halls together. They were so cute, like nice friends. And so then I was so surprised. It was literally finals week. And then they come to my room like having problems because they're having a lot of issues with the bedding situation. They said when they first moved into the dorms that they would rotate beds every semester or something so that each of them could have the window by the bed. But then now the person with the window by the bed didn't want to switch. And then it was causing all these other problems. They couldn't figure out their problems, which was so sad because they were like so close and they were so friendly together before. And so after that first semester, then one of them moved out. So then it was just so sad that that person had to move out because they couldn't figure out the bed situation.
My first year as an RA, I got a lot of roommate conflicts. One of them was like a triple, but it was like a one-on-one conflict within it, and then like a neutral party. And so one of them, she was supporting herself through college, like paying her tuition and bills through being a dancer in a nearby city. Part of that profession, she ended up getting a piercing on a part of her body that her other roommate did not approve of. And instead of really hashing it out directly, she went to the rest of the floor and like kind of publicly shamed this other resident for being a dancer in the city. It basically became a whole floor fight where everyone had to take a side, and then it was really mediating this entire community that was then on one side of the battle or the other, depending on which person they were aligned with their social circle. And so it was one of the most bizarre things ever, where it was like a blown up war over this body piercing. It was like this whole thing where you then have to step in the community and remind people of diversity of thought, opinion, expression, all of that, and creating that inclusive community can sometimes be so much harder than you think.
The next category is alcohol and residents and writing them up.
A big weekend at our school was Halloween weekend, where there'd be a bunch of parties going on in different places across campus. So a lot of people end up visiting our school from other schools or other areas to experience Halloween weekend. And so this was a story about a resident that had 10 people visiting from other schools, and it was just this awesome reunion for them. They got to see each other. They were all freshmen, so they were so excited. Like, this is the first time since high school, they're all back together. And so they celebrated by throwing a wine party in their room. And I was on my rounds, as this always happened when I was on rounds. There was always something going on, and you see someone outside the door, like, "Oh, what's going on in here? RA on duty." And of course, this person had already consumed a lot of the wine. They're like, "Yo, we got so much wine in here. We're having so much fun. We're throwing a party. It's lit. It's Halloween weekend. Like, come on in. I'll pour you a glass." And then I literally disclaimed myself as an RA on duty. So at that point, they opened up the door, and we didn't have badges or anything, but I literally felt like an undercover cop being like, "RA on duty, I'm sorry, but I know you guys are having so much fun, but you're not allowed to drink on the premises. And so I will need you to dump out all the alcohol." And so they were really sweet about it. They walked with me and took like bottle after bottle of wine to the bathroom, and we had to watch it dump all the way down all the sinks and drains. That was part of our protocol. I personally felt so bad, but it's the rules and it's our job. And it was just funny, like being invited to a residence party and then having to be a bus.
Yeah, so I feel like a similar thing. I wasn't on duty, but I was the backup person on duty. So it's like in a different building, but there's always like multiple people on duty. So if like the main person needs help, like John said, you call the secondary person. And so the main person called me because she just saw someone vomit off of like the second floor balcony. And so the vomit like literally landed on the sidewalk below at the entrance of other people's doors. So if they walked outside, they'd be like walking into this chunky vomit pool, and it was like literally like you could see that person's dinner in the vomit. It was like chunky. So she calls and she's like, "There's vomit on the ground, but like I can't find this person. Like I don't know where the vomit came from." So I'm like, "Okay, like I'll come check it out." And so I go over there and like go up the building, and then we find the person, and they're like in the stairwell, which like while intoxicated is obviously very dangerous. And because he was also like running up and down the stairs, but then he like fell and then he was like falling down the stairs. And so it was so bad because it's like, as an RA, you can't touch the residents. And so we can't like hold him back or like prevent him from like falling or running up and down the stairs. So yeah, obviously like then you call the police and the fire department, they come to do a wellness check on the resident. And so like whenever they do a wellness check, they always ask you like questions like, do you know what year it is? Who's the president? Like, where are we right now? And then this kid could like not answer any of the questions. And yeah, when that happens, then they take you away in the ambulance to go to the hospital. And for some reason, the ambulance costs like $1,500 that the student then has to pay after the fact, which like totally sucks. The next category is a party bust.
So yes, another time when it was, again, my first year being an RA, I think my second month of being an RA, and again around Halloween time, maybe right before, the residents were finally at that point where they like knew each other. They had finally said hi in the bathrooms. They had finally like taken a class together and noticed they were sitting 3 rows away. So when they're friends and they're all ready to enjoy that social side of being in a dorm, one night I was on duty and I get a call about a party. And normally the calls kind of go from another room. They're like, we're trying to sleep. We have an exam coming up. It's really noisy. Please resolve the issue. And so you're in charge of getting out of your own bed, walking in the cold to get to the other building, and then dealing with it. And so in this case, I was ready to knock on a door and talk to one person playing music too loud, or maybe they were singing. Sometimes I had fun residents that just wanted to artistically express themselves, and unfortunately it violated our policies. But in this case, knock on the door, it opens up, and there is 40 people in one triple. And so you can imagine it can only be so big of a room. I don't know how it fit 40 people. There were people on the beds, on the floor, they brought in one of the tables from the lounge. They were playing drinking games. And you then have to bust the party and write up as many people as you can, which obviously 40 people is like a stampede. When they know that you're the RA and they're scared, they start sprinting. As Rachel mentioned previously, you can't touch them. You can't pursue them. You feel bad because then you're kind of punishing the good kids that follow the rules and be like, yeah, I'm sorry, I attended this. Here's my ID. And then they're the ones that get busted for the party, as well as the people whose room it was. But it's just insane that it's like, okay, this is my second month as an RA, my first ever like party bus, and there's 40 kids in one room. And then you have to yell to even say like RA on duty, and then everyone's even more afraid, so they start sprinting. It was just so funny just seeing people flying past you, like drinks being dumped on the floor, like no one wanted to get caught with anything.
Yeah, that really reminds me of like our other coworkers that year. I think they busted like a 100-person party in a suite, which I'm like, how the heck do you know that many people first? And how do you fit that many people in your small room? The next category is cleaning up poop and vomit. I guess just in general, people poop in like the elevators, they poop in trash cans, they vomit in trash cans, or they vomit in the sink one time. And I was like, yo, the toilet is right there. You could have flushed it. Instead, you do it in the sink with chunks that don't go down the sink. As an RA, we get vomit kits. And so you have to go get the vomit kit, like do all the chemicals and stuff on the vomit kit, and you leave it there. And then I think emergency maintenance will come and like clean it after, but it's like the vomit sits there for like hours or days if it's on the weekend, just like in the chemicals, but like the chemicals prevent the smell or like the transfer of disease, I guess.
Towards the end of my first year, residents were getting really lazy about where they used what part of the bathroom. And a lot of people loved shaving in the shower and clogging the drains. And then you have to call maintenance, or maintenance just hates you because they know that you're in charge of the community and they're cleaning up everyone's other stuff like in the drains, and it's just terrible for everyone. And then other times they just like poop in the showers, and then you'd have to be like, emergency maintenance. And then they're calling like, oh, what's the emergency? And they're like, poop in the shower. And then you just know, but it's protocol, so you do it. But
the amount of times, if you're living in the dorms in a communal bathroom, that you see people don't flush the toilet. So the amount of time that you see pee or poo just in the toilet, floating there.
Yeah, one time I had a resident that was throwing up in the toilet, and it was after a social event where they had a date, and I was knocking on the stall door saying, "Are you on duty? Do you need any help? Are you okay?" All of that. And they thought I was their date. So they're like, "I don't want you to see me like this. Go away. I don't know. Like, step away. You're hearing me. Like, I'm just going to sit here and hold my breath until you leave." And I was like, "I'm not your date. I'm your RA. Like, I have to make sure you're safe. I legally can't leave. I have to make sure that you're okay." And all of that. And so she thought that I was her date for the night, but I was really just there to make sure she was living through the ordeal.
And finally, the last category is safety and theft. Because I feel like a lot of people, they like don't lock their doors, which for all of you watching, you should always lock your doors because people, random people that don't live in the dorms can sneak in or follow other people in. Even if you have like security monitors, people sitting at the front desk checking IDs, people can still get in. Like I have found random people in the bathrooms, they won't leave the bathrooms.
When my first year I was an RA, it was just a trend to everyone's friends, so no one locks their door. We'll set our doorstop in front of the door, so you never even need to bring your keys. Like they went out a lot, they would always forget their keys and then be locked out. And then after enough lockouts, you get charged. So they thought it was we're going to circumvent the system and just never lock our doors. And then so then they were even more inclined to help people tailgate in the building, which is a big no-no when you're an RA. You tell all your residents, don't let anyone follow you in this building. They need to show ID, they need to use it to open, or otherwise use a key or be a staff member. They cannot just follow you in. That's a huge liability and safety concern. And no one here wants to have a bunch of random people in the halls. And so one time we got an extreme example of that. And one time, this was not me, but another staff member, they were woken up at 4 a.m. and there was a knock at their door. And they're like, "Okay, what do you need?" Like they're barely awake. And they're like, "Someone robbed us, like in our room. We woke up in our room and they were wearing our clothes. All of our stuff was packed up in bags and we didn't know what to do." And then the RA was like, "Did you call the police?" And they're like, "No." "Did you call the RA on duty?" "No." And they're like, "So you just came and I'm the first person you're telling?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so then the RA had to call the police and everything and file a police report, but they had left the door unlocked and someone had let this person tailgate in, the criminal. And so they tailgated into the building and then they found this unlocked door. They opened it when everyone was asleep in the room. They went and stole so much of their stuff, their IDs, their wallets, all packed up in bags, their laptops, their clothes. To have you wake up and someone else is in your own clothing, and they just screamed and they're like, "What are you doing in here?" And then they got away with everything and luckily were caught later on. But it was just a huge example of don't like please lock your doors because otherwise you might be robbed and you might wake up to someone else in your clothes. Another scary one around Halloween was one of the suite buildings nearby. There were just reports of this mystery old woman who just roamed the halls and no one knew how she got in and no one knew where she was from or anything, but there were multiple occasions where she thought it was her home or otherwise and she was just roaming the halls and it was this scary ghost lady thing.
Yeah, I was like,
So
is it a ghost? I feel like they're like the rumors it was like, oh, the abandoned building behind us is where like the ghosts were, right?
yeah. And then in that same building, there were people that had returned from the previous year that wanted to see their old room. So this is another thing to keep your windows closed is they scaled the wall and climbed in through the window to see their old room. So lock your doors and windows, kids. I also had one resident who thankfully didn't lock his window because it was move out. Like, and with move out, we had to clear the building, make sure everyone was all gone. And then the next day, cleaning staff went in, cleaned out all the rooms, and then we as RAs left. And one of my residents had disappeared. No one had seen him in a week. And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, is he dead? Like, what happened to this kid?" Like, no one knew. And his roommate was really concerned. They filed a police report. No one could find him. And then everyone moved out. This was the very end of the year. And it was the day when even the RAs were moving out. Like, it was the last hour. And I get a knock on my door and I'm like, "What's going on?" And this kid's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just like left town for a bit, but I saw my window was left open. So I climbed the 3-story wall and like, I'm here to move out now." And I was like, "What?" So then more work as an RA, you have to report it. You have to check out the room, get the key, all of that. But it was just wild that this kid just like decided to disappear during finals week before move out and thought it'd be fine to just come back after. And we charged $100 an hour that someone was late to move out. So it was a hefty fine.
That's so insane. Like Are all of our residents rock climbers? Why do they all think that they can just scale these tall buildings? Which I'm like, move out is honestly the best time for RAs, because like after the residents move out, like John was saying, then like the doors all get locked and then we have to go in and then check all of the rooms. Usually sometimes some residents are like really bad at packing and they wait till like the day of that they're going to start to get fined, or a lot of them are late or they wake up late and then they can't get out of their room. So a lot of people are like really bad at packing, and then they leave a lot of like cool stuff in the rooms. And so when the RAs go in after, you can usually find some like really cool things. So yeah, this was the end of us sharing our fun RA experiences. Definitely let us know down below if you wanted to see a part 2 of this video with even more RA stories. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Definitely give this video a big thumbs up to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to my channel to see more. I post every single Sunday and Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and we want to hear your stories too. So if any of this resonated with you and you had a similar story, we'd love to hear it. Comment below.
So we will see you all next time.